the Integrity Capital education tutorial. Today I'm going to be talking about single tenant properties and acquiring single tenant properties. And if you're watching this video, chances are this is probably your first time buying a commercial real estate property. And so the objective today is to talk about what is it that you need to focus on from an investment perspective and from a financing perspective when it comes to acquiring a single tenant commercial real estate property. Now, when you're looking at a single tenant property, you have to remember that the key focus for a lender is really looking at the tenant themselves. They're going to be looking at the stability of the tenant, how long the tenant has been there, if the tenant has multiple locations, if it is a credit tenant versus somebody that's just a local private party. When we're talking about that, the tenant is such an emphasis, and the industry is a big factor. All of these things the lender is going to be looking at relative to how they're going to be underwriting. Let's first talk about the tenant themselves. So one of the aspects you're going to be looking at is, are they in a specific industry? Is it a restaurant industry or is it a non-restaurant industry? Remember that restaurants are going to be higher risk capacity. Second thing that they're going to be looking at is the tenant a publicly traded company, or is it rated with a rating agency like a Moody's or an S&P? They want to know, is this a large tenant versus a small tenant? Is it a large guarantor behind the lease, or is it a small guarantor behind the lease? For example, might be looking at a Walgreens or CVS or Buffalo Wild Wings or something along those lines that is a larger credit agency or a credit tenant, as they would say. A credit tenant can also fall into the category of somebody that's more of a private tenant, but they may be large. They just aren't publicly traded, and so maybe they're rated on Dun and Bradstreet and they have multiple locations. So again, the tenant is really, really important to understand. How large are they? If it is a large parent company, are they going to be actually looking to guarantee from the parent company versus an individual LLC? So that's kind of where the lender is going to be focusing on, is what is the strength, the financial capacity of that tenant. So going on to that, the lender would like to see financials on that tenant, as well as I would imagine you would as well. They want to know how's their balance sheet, how's their cash, do they have a lot of debt? They want to know, are they profitable? You know, these are real basic things that you're going to want to know because you're going to be acquiring this yourself, is to the stability of that lease, how strong that is from the tenant's perspective. In many instances, you might not be able to get financials, and that will be a hindrance in you proceeding forward. It will shrink the world of lenders down for you. The other thing you're going to want to see is, if it is a local ma and pa tenant, somebody that does not have multiple locations, or it's not considered credit tenant, then they will still want to see financials on that tenant, as well as you will. They want to again see, is it profitable? Do they have cash? Do they show that they make money on their tax returns as well as their profit and loss statements? These are things that you're going to want to see as well as the lender. Another thing that you're going to want to focus on is, what is the capitalization rate? Again, that capitalization rate is just going to be a function of what return you're going to be getting for the risk. So again, you're going to be taking a risk on. You want to get a return for it. If it's a strong tenant in a great market, chances are you're going to be paying a lower yield. So you might get a 6 cap versus an 8 cap, which is again just that net operating income relative to the purchase price. So all you're going to be doing is taking that net income you're receiving and dividing that by whatever that purchase price is, or asking price. That is going to be the number that's going to tell you what return you're getting for the acquisition. Some other things that you're going to want to focus on as well is to see if there is any out clauses in the lease, meaning is there anything in there that states that they have the ability to cancel the lease early or get out of it. Again, that could be common with what is called a GSA lease or a government service lease, where they within 90 days they can cancel the lease at any given time. Another thing you're going to want to focus on as well is how long is the lease? Is it coming up in 3 years, or is it a 20-year lease? These, again, are risk-oriented items that the lender is going to look at, and you should as well. The length of the lease is really, again, a huge component to this, because that is going to stretch out for a long period of time. They may have options to renew, but if a lender is going to come in and lend a 10-year fixed and there's only 3 years left, there's risk. There's what they call hangout or hangover. So again, something that you're going to want to particularly focus on is how long is that lease, or how much term is remaining on that lease. Again, the sheet that you're probably going to be getting from me is going to help you do some real quick underwriting on it. So some of the things you'll put in there are the property square footage, which will be an input on the underwriting. If it's a single tenant, you'll put the 1 unit. You're going to want to put the gross rents, okay? Because remember, if it is a single tenant, you want to know, is it triple net, which is net, net, net to the tenant, or is it a gross lease, which is the tenant pays one lease per month, and then all of the expenses are the responsibility of the landlord. If it's net, 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 that means all of the expenses above and beyond the base rent are the responsibility of the tenant. Or sometimes you'll fall somewhere in between where it's a modified gross, where, again, the tenant may pay for the property taxes, but you as the landlord may be responsible for utilities and insurance and maybe management fees. So again, that's something you want to look at on the lease, is to make sure that this is something you're clear about, because your return depends on it. So again, you're going to want to put the gross rents, any CAM reimbursements, which again are something that you might pay for but gets reimbursed by the tenant back to you. You'll want to put in a vacancy factor. I just use 5%. It'll calculate what that vacancy number is. It'll calculate the net effective rent. And then you want to put in the operating expenses. Typically, you're going to want to ask the seller or the broker, if they have some of that information, to know what is the historical operating expenses. If in doubt, you may want to use $3.50 a foot. Again, that'll generate a net income. CapEx is capital expenditures. You want to use probably 10 cents a foot. That'll automatically generate that as well. I use an 8 cap almost on everything. I might go lower if it's a credit tenant, and then just put in whatever loan amount that you are going to believe that will be the final loan amount. That'll spit out a value. An LTV will be generated on that, which is the loan to value. What is the loan relative to the purchase price or value? You want to put in a rate. I could just use 5% and 300 months for the amortization. And that'll give you the monthly payments, the yearly payments, the cost per foot that you're going to pay, and whatever the debt service coverage ratio. And the main thing on this is the debt service coverage ratio and the cost per foot. Again, 1.2 to 1.25 is a normal number, but again, depending on the risk of the tenant, it may be higher. So keep that in mind when you're going through and making some decisions. So again, this is some information from Dave Kotter with Integrity Capital. We appreciate your time and look forward to working with you.